No amplifier is perfect, but this one gets pretty darn close for me. So I'm gonna try not to get flustered in this video, because whenever I talk about the Marshall Studio Vintage head, it's just so good that I can't help but smile and just, you know, sometimes I feel like a young schoolgirl just gushing over this thing. The Studio Vintage from Marshall is perhaps right now my favorite Marshall amplifier. I did have the full plexi, 50 watt, more than one. Tried to manage the sound, tried to work with it in lower volume scenarios and higher volume scenarios, and unfortunately that never worked. They are glorious sounding amplifiers as well, but unfortunately just not manageable in terms of sound volume. So whenever I have an opportunity to play through this is my go-to amplifier. Of course, when Marshall came out with the Studio Vintage head, it sounded too good to be true. You know, vintage tone, smaller form factor, lower volume, and the price was right. I had to take a chance and grab one. You know, I could be wrong and I would just have to sell it, but thankfully it's still here. Many of you have asked me about that and say, hey Tony, you know, do you still have the Marshall? I still have the Marshall, guys. Unfortunately, it's hidden behind me in most of my videos, but it's here. And I do play it almost every single day, and it works so well in so many scenarios. So let me try and explain what you have here. It's a great Marshall vintage inspired amplifier, lower wattage as I mentioned, and that is probably one of its biggest claim to fame, is the fact that you do have a switch here that allows you to go from full 20 watts all the way to 5 watts. You have your typical power, and when the scale switch is in the middle position, it's also on standby, so you don't lose the standby switch that you typically had in the older ones. I'm really happy that Marshall did not change a thing. They kept it the way the original was, and I think that's what everybody wants out of a Marshall. So you still have the 4-input design here, and for those of you who don't know, who perhaps haven't played Marshall amps, you can jumper these inputs. So basically you have two volumes, a high and a low. Number one is high, number two is low, and by jumpering them you could mix the high and low signal and really dial in the sound the way you want it. So you can cut any of those harsh highs if you want, bring up the bottom. You can do a heck of a lot just with this section of the amplifier. Now of course the other knobs here in the tone stack haven't changed. You have treble, middle, bass, presence as you always did, as well as the typical Marshall square light indicator. Other than that, it's pretty much standard Marshall. The only thing that's really changed is the size, and that's actually a good thing because they've actually reduced the size of the box, so it actually makes it easier to transport. Full tube design. They didn't do any fancy transistor magic, anything like that. So I'm happy to say that it's full tube. This amp is made in England. It's maybe one of the last ones that are going to be made in England. I don't really know what's going to happen, but we know that Marshall has been purchased by another company recently. So I'm happy that these particular models were still being made in England. Now, if you're into classic rock, if you're an older dude like me and you really love the 60s and 70s tones, it has it in spades. You can definitely get AC/DC tones out of this. You can get Led Zeppelin tones out of it. You can get ZZ Top tones. Put a Strat in front of this and you're in Hendrix land. Obviously, using pedals with this, you can get into higher gain stuff as well. A lot of people don't think you can, but you can. You know, just by cutting the highs and boosting the mids on this thing, you can get into early Van Halen all day long as well. So it's a very versatile amplifier. What are the cons? Maybe some people might consider the fact that it's a one-channel amplifier a con. To me, that's debatable. I don't think you actually need more than one channel if you know how to use your amp properly. But some people might prefer to have switchable channels. I like the simplicity of this amp. You know, it's a set it and forget it type thing, and that's what I really like. But if you learn how to use the tone stack and you learn what pedals work well with the amplifier, there's no issue. There really isn't. That's the other thing I wanted to mention, is that the amplifier takes pedals so well that I've thrown everything at this thing and I haven't had any issues with it. Honestly, there's not one pedal that I can say really did very poorly with the amplifier. It really plays with pedals well. And of course, if you still want to have the ability to use your modulation effects and you don't like going into the front of the amp, Marshall did retain the effects loops in the back. Not only that, they are switchable. There is a little switch there so you can dial out the effects loops if you want. If you want to be a purist and you don't like to use the effects loop in the circuit, you can just take it out and go right through the front. Other than that, the only other debatable negative, I would say, or con perhaps, or maybe improvement is a better word. Some people do claim that the stock preamp tubes in the amplifier could be better and that the amplifier sounds better once those are swapped out for higher end tubes. I can't comment on that really. I haven't had the opportunity to have to change tubes on this. I've been playing it almost every day. Tubes are still going great. Eventually, when they do die on me, I will maybe experiment with some new tubes just to see if I can get even better sound out of it. Why not? It's always something that you should check out if you can. But in terms of durability, they're still going strong, so I don't know how long that's going to be. Now, I've been matching up this amplifier with my vintage Marshall 4x12 cabinet with 65 speakers. They're also made in England, old-time speakers, and it's just a perfect match, a match made in heaven. Now, you can still get these amplifiers. I know they're still for sale. I think you can still get some. Obviously, the price has gone up like everything else. If you can grab one of these on the used market in good condition, I would highly recommend you do so. It's probably an amplifier that's going to give you the best bang for the buck if you're into that Marshall vintage tone, which I don't know that many people that don't like that tone. Match this up with higher gain pedals and you can definitely get into the 80s territory if you like the 80s tone and beyond. Clean headroom obviously is a little bit less than what you would get with a 50-watt amplifier because it is only 20 watts obviously. So you're going to reduce the clean headroom. But for me, that's never been an issue. I don't need a ton of clean headroom for the style of music that I play. I like edge of breakup type stuff. Plenty of clean headroom in terms of what I play. Putting a boost pedal in front of this is really all you need to get into that classic rock territory. Just pump it up and blow the drummer away. It's definitely a loud 20 watts, guys. Don't be fooled. Even the 5-watt mode at home is loud. I've had plenty of complaints even playing through the 5-watt mode at home, so don't be afraid that you won't have enough power. This amplifier delivers. Guys, if you like this channel, you like what we're doing here, support the channel by giving us a thumbs up, consider subscribing. I'll be posting more videos, so stay tuned.